remember in skeletal muscle, myosin was always ready to bind to actin, but there was something physically preventing it, and that was the tropomyosin. Here, we have in smooth muscle, we have myosin existing in two different forms, an inactive form and an active form. And so we just need to get to the question of the point of how do we activate myosin. So we want to do that. Then when we're done with the lecture, we've got a couple lab activities we want to do. We're going to be doing some nervous system lab stuff and basically looking at reaction times. How long does it take for the body to respond to a stimulus once a stimulus has been given? So we'll do that, and I'll comment more on that when we switch over to lab. Then we're going to be looking at some muscle properties, in particular, looking at something called the muscle twitch. What I drew on the board over here, just this part right here, is what's called a muscle twitch. Now, it's different than what you think of when a muscle twitches. That's not what I'm talking about. A muscle twitch is when a motor unit, and a motor unit is a motor neuron and all of the skeletal muscle fibers that it innervates. That's the level of regulation we have, right? We can't control it at any level less than that. When the motor neuron has an action potential and releases acetylcholine, all of the muscle cells that motor neuron innervates will respond. And when they respond, they generate tension, and then when the signal's gone, they will relax, right? So if we give a stimulus to contract, and what this is right here is an action potential on the sarcolemma, we see that initially the muscle doesn't respond immediately, right? There is what we call a latent period here where it takes time for the muscles to start to, this is force here, to start to generate tension and contract. And what's happening during this period is that excitation-contraction coupling, right? Here is an action potential on the sarcolemma. It takes time to travel down the T-tubules. It takes time for the DHP and the RYR receptors to open up calcium channels. And then at this point, calcium starts flooding out into the cytoplasm. And as calcium floods out to the cytoplasm, it displaces troponin, displaces tropomyosin, and we start to get power stroke cycling. If the stimulus is gone, we know that pumps are working to relax the muscle, right? We are resetting the action potential. We're pumping calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and the muscle will start to relax. So this is the twitch, the response of a motor unit to a single stimulus. Latent period, period of contraction when we have power stroke cycling, period of relaxation when we're actively removing the calcium from the cytoplasm back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. In skeletal muscles, this takes on the neighborhood of, depending upon the type of muscle cell, 150 to 250 milliseconds or so. Okay, so you could get 4 of these in a second about. Okay. Now, I didn't go into this part and I didn't put it on the test, so I don't want to focus on it too much. But there are different, every muscle as an organ has different kinds of cells in it, right? And there are cells in the body, muscle cells in the body that are adapted for power, and there are muscle cells in the body that are adapted for endurance. Okay? And there's a trade-off between these. Power cells, while they generate a lot of force, they fatigue really quickly. So if we were to see how one of those, they're called white glycolytic fibers, and they almost work exclusively by anaerobic respiration. If we were to see how they respond rapidly, generate a lot of force, and then contract and relax quickly. So they're quick, right? Power, think bursts of power, sprinting, heavy weight lifting, those kinds of things. They tire very quickly. You know, a person cannot maintain that burst of energy for a long period of time. Those cells that are responsible for that high power fatigue really quickly. And that's because they don't have any way to store oxygen in the cells. They just run out of ATP, and lactic acid builds up really quickly because there's no oxygen. On the other hand, there are muscle cells that are, what we call them, red, because they have something in them called myoglobin that stores oxygen. And they do all of their ATP synthesis by cellular respiration. So they have a lot of ATP. They don't do anaerobic respiration, but they're slow. So they would get a stimulus and they would respond slowly. They're weak, and then they would relax. Okay? Now, different people genetically have different amounts, right? You know, some people are predisposed to be stronger than others. Other people are predisposed to have more endurance. Generally speaking, males have more, everything else being equal, have more of the power type of muscle fibers, and females have more of the endurance. So everything else being equal, women are better adapted for endurance activities, males better adapted for strength activities. And again, it's because we have these kind of different kind of muscles. Different muscles in the body have different proportions, right? Muscles that we adapt for strength and power have more of those. So we have that kind of flexibility within a muscle to do that, but it still is going to be a latent period of contraction and period of relaxation. The only difference is how quickly you get this twitch in response to that and how much strength you have for that. Okay. Now what's interesting is that this is the twitch you get with a single stimulus. What would happen if we kept stimulating a muscle to contract? If you keep stimulating a muscle to contract, that's what I've done right here, you'll see that you never give it an opportunity to relax. So we're going to do something that we call summation. So here we had a stimulus. We had a latent period of contraction, and we started a period of relaxation, but then I told it to contract again, and it starts contracting again on top of that. And then I tell it contract again, and it contracts. And we get this stair-step summation here, where the result is a maximal contraction. So if you take a motor neuron and keep sending action potentials one right after the other really quickly, every muscle cell that that motor neuron controls will contract to its maximal force. Okay? And when we reach that maximal force, that's called tetany. Okay? Now this tetany is a state of full contraction, and it will continue as long as we keep stimulating the fiber. If I stop stimulating the fiber right here, we relax back down to normal. But if I kept stimulating, it's going to contract and contract and contract. But at some point, every skeletal muscle cell will fatigue, meaning that even though I'm telling it to contract, 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 it will not contract in response to that stimulus. Now, what causes this fatigue? So you can see right here, I've been at maximum contraction, but I'm still telling it to contract, but it's getting tired, and it's getting weaker. Right? You've all experienced